Hippolyta returns to save Dee, Tick learns more about the family dynamic, and Montrose, Tick, and Letty retrieve the Book of Names. Guys, we are at the finale, the final episode of season 1 for Lovecraft Country. Stay tuned as we dive into the finale of Lovecraft Country in this episode of Blerd Up Reviews.
Welcome back, fam, to another episode of Blerd Up Reviews, where we talk about all things movies, TV, and gaming, all with a blurred twist. We're your host. I'm Killer Cam.
And I'm Monique.
And guys, we are at the finale, the last episode from season 1 of Lovecraft Country. I don't know about you, but I am extremely, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah, what are we going to do with our Sundays now, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a ritual and it's such a great show, and it's going off for now. Hopefully it'll be back for season 2. But just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everybody who has been liking and subscribing to these videos, because again, your feedback, your views helps us grow as a new channel, and by far Lovecraft Country, this review series, has been one of our biggest pulls, and we know we couldn't have did that without you guys, so just want to say thank you. A few people we do want to shout out who have been with us from day one. We've got Kamara Harrington, we got Mark Hosey, Mary Miller, The Silver Site. If you guys aren't familiar with RJ, please jump over to his channel at The Silver Site and check out some of his content. He's a good dude. We got Ann Moore, we got Gerald Deet Spiff, we've got Chance, we've got Toto, Margaret Highsmith, Shawnee Longbow. I mean, the list goes on. And again, it definitely makes us feel good when we do these reviews. We upload them, and literally within 2 minutes, you guys are all in the comments, you know? So from us to you, thank you so much for your support. As we get into this episode review for Lovecraft Country. In the previous episode, they went back to 1921, the site of the Tulsa Massacre.
Yep, they did. They found out, or Tick found out a lot about, his family dynamic with Tick, Montrose, and Dora. And I felt like he softened up a little bit to Montrose because he actually finally understands why Montrose is the way he is today. Also, Letty was able to work with Miss Hattie and get the Book of Names and bring it back to I was going to say the present time, but it's not the present time, but but bring it back in order to save Dee.
Yeah, so basically jumping into this episode is picking up right where it left off. So before we jump into this review, again, if you are new to our channel, definitely check out this playlist for Lovecraft Country reviews. I guarantee you we cover some things that other people might have missed. We'll go ahead and pop up the subscribe button here now. And that way, if you want to stay up to date with new content we have coming, hit that button and you'll stay in the loop. All right. Finale, Lovecraft Country, full circle. Mm-hmm. So basically this episode, like I said, it does pick up where the last one left off. They meet back at George's garage / their house with the Book of Names and Dee in tow. And basically Tick says the words that Hattie provided to Letty in order to unbind the book. And immediately the book just flies open. It goes directly to a page with a symbol, which is their birthmark symbol. Mm-hmm. As soon as it comes up, literally Tick and Letty hit the floor. Like they're down. And they end up in this, I guess it's called the ancestral plane. And basically for Tick, he ends up back in the lodge following Hannah running through the fire, through the door, and finally, great grandma Hannah opens her mouth to talk. What did you feel about that scene?
I mean, I love the whole scene. Again, like you said, finally, after all these episodes, we get to hear Hannah speak, and what she tells Tick is something that's going to be very important throughout this episode. Basically, she tells him the answer is in his blood, because he's like, I've got to save Dee, and Hannah basically gives him the answer to save Dee. But I really loved how they showed this ancestral plane in terms of, it being on fire, and Hannah explaining that was, her rage. It kind of reminded me of Black Panther a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing about that is that ancestral plane was actually created by accident. It was created as a result of a binding spell she put on their bloodline to keep the Braithwaites and any other person who wanted to leverage their bloodline to use magic away from them. So this ancestral plane that she's in was created as just kind of like a side effect. And it kind of drove her to kill herself. So when she did this spell, she kept finding herself in this ancestral plane, not understanding what it was. And of course, back then, you're in an area where it's got fire all over. You're like, damn, I'm in hell, So it drove her to kill herself. But after she passed over, she came to understand what it was, that it was a safe space for their ancestors. If you look faintly up on the walls in each of these scenes, you start to see various symbols that are from the Book of Names inside that space. So she ends up explaining to Tick the purpose, because he's like, yo, we need to leverage this book, find a spell to save my cousin D. And Hanny's like, baby, you're gonna save all of them. And of course we look like but then we flip over to Leti, who is also in the ancestral plane, but it's in the form of the 1921 house where she was getting the Book of Names from Miss Hattie. Miss Hattie goes on to explain, you're part of the family now because of the one you carry, so you have access to this place. She explains what happened with the book, how the ancestral plane was created, just having the same conversation as Hannah's having with Tick, but also passing it over to Leti, who's like, girl, this is your responsibility now. How did you feel about that?
Again, very informational and great scene within the show, because we actually learn that, Hattie is at this point telling Leti, don't let what Hannah did, in terms of being so afraid of the book, don't be like that. Basically, this is something that's for you guys. This is something for you guys can use. Don't think that it's a bad thing and try to bind it, and not use it. This is something that y'all need to, and y'all are going to use, to help your family and help others.
Definitely. And the other thing that I found very how do I want to say, symbolic about this scene, because now between the conversation with Hannah and the conversation with Hattie, you're starting to understand, well, I started to understand that Tick's not going to make it out of this alive. Mm-hmm. Like, mm-hmm. It's almost a written destiny that he's got to sacrifice himself in order to rectify this situation. So we bounce back over to Tick, and he's in Montrose's apartment, but it's still the ancestral plane, and you see Miss Dora come around the corner. And baby, when I tell you, now, number one, I was like, look at Miss Dora, she kind of fly, like snatched waist, look cute, but also there was this moment, like when they're laying eyes upon each other, that I was like, oh my God, mommy, like, I mean, did you feel like that?
Yeah, most definitely. I thought it was one of the sweetest scenes out of all of the Lovecraft Country season that I've seen, because, Tick finally gets to see his mother, and you can actually, and I love how Jonathan Majors, performed in this scene, because you can actually see him just melt from being this, strong, man, into just being that child again. And you see him melt into that, character, you put him putting his head on Endora's lap and everything. So I thought it was a wonderful scene, well acted scene, and I really could tell through the scene, like, oh man, I could tell just basically what he was feeling.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You actually mentioned this earlier, that this whole season we've been seeing Tick as this strong, headstrong, stubborn, kind of character, between his emotional outbursts with Montrose and all that stuff, to him really reverting to a little boy, showing that vulnerability within him, which I appreciated as well. And it was almost like he was telling on like he was telling on Dora. No, he was telling on Hannah to Dora, like, Mama, you hear what they said to me, what I gotta do. So I was like, oh, poor guy, poor guy. But she just basically explains, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was her who said the quote, like, what good is it to sacrifice yourself and not get anything from it? You might as well sacrifice yourself to, I can't remember the exact words. Did you have them?
Yeah, basically she said if we ain't walking toward an altar to sacrifice ourselves for something important, what is our purpose? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that was like, again, a nail in the coffin for me. Like, he's gonna die. Did you feel that way? Did you get that?
I kind of felt like they were setting it up that way, but I still felt like this might be like any other show that we've, seen before. I still felt like there was some kind of way he was going to, get out of it, or maybe they were going to come up with a plan to get him out of it so he can eventually, live, and didn't have to sacrifice himself.
Yeah. At that scene hammered it down for me. I was like, he's gonna die. Um, but eventually, Hattie, Dora, they all come together with Tick and Letty to get this spell lifted off of Dee. So they're like in the ancestral plane at the bed where Dee is laying in the real world, and they start chanting this spell. And you start to see, I was calling it like the sickness, the spell kind of formulate here in the ancestral plane, and then back in the real world, Montrose and Hippolyta are trying to wake Tick and Letty up, and Hippolyta notices that something's changing with Dee. So they get the spell out. Of course, they wake up. Dee is all fine. Almost. Her arm is still rotted. So that kind of sucks, but at least they've gotten this spell off of her at this point.
Yeah. So we get this next scene where they're all pretty much at George's apartment, and Lick. I keep saying that. Tick and Letty,
Leticus.
right?
Leticus.
And Tick and Letty are explaining to Hippolyta and Montrose basically what happened to them, and basically what they were told they would have to do in order to do this spell that Hannah has told them about. And Montrose, being that guy who doesn't want to let his son, die or sacrifice himself. He's fighting it, boy.
Yeah.
He's fighting it at this point because he does not want Tick to die. And I think at some point Tick and Letty realize that, and they're just like, oh, well, that's just one way it can go. That's not guaranteed that that I'm gonna die at the end of this. And that's the only way that really Montrose lets it go. He has that little glimmer of hope that they gave him, and they're like, okay, well, this is all gonna work out fine because he's not gonna die. I think he's kind of convincing himself that.
Yeah, that was that was one of those things where you kind of literally saw in their faces, like, okay, he ain't gonna let up on this. So no, there's multiple ways this to go, but this is what needs to happen. We need to get the body of Titus. We need to get the body of Christina in order to create this binding spell to prevent the autonomous equinox immortality spell from happening. So they basically Tick and Letty get to work. They're back at her house, backpacks on, they're on a mission. They head down to the basement. You hear some growling in the basement, and I look and I'm like, that's the Shoggoth. Like, I was wondering where it was. Like, because at least with Christina knows, they had the whole woods to roam around. I was like, where do y'all hide a 400, maybe 1,000-pound monster with a million eyes? Where is it at? And apparently it's in the basement. So they end up using her elevator to go back down to, I guess, the portal in the basement of what was it, the conservatory? It was a museum.
Yeah, to go back to where the Braithwaite, it was a museum, but there's like the Braithwaite section of the museum, basically going back to episode, what is it, 3 or 4?
3.
So yeah, to where they went on the Indiana Jones type journey. But they do venture back to that spot, and they start, like you said, they're on a mission in this scene. They start setting up symbols everywhere, salt circles, everything. I mean, they basically, Hannah has gave them the tools that they need at this point to save their family, and they're
Yeah.
packing up like okay, Judgment Day type of T2, like bring it on, you know.
Yeah, so they start laying the salt circles and they start saying the spell. And was it me? I was like, oh, so both of y'all are proficient in this language now. But I did chalk it up to them being in the ancestral plane, you know.
Yeah, I didn't mind Tick because he's been the one who's been studying the language of Adam. But when Letty start, spouting out them language of Adam words, I was like, now hold up. That might have took me out just a little bit of the whole thing. That was probably the
uh,
only thing this episode that took me out. But yeah, I thought that was
I
funny.
It was what it was, but they end up conjuring Titus, and in the process, they also conjure Hattie. Not Hattie, Hannah. And Titus was like, "What are you doing with my book?" And Hannah's like, "Hold on now. This magic was stolen," which kind of led me to a theory that I had in previous episodes, because I was like, I don't feel, just like the elements of some of the magic that was being performed by Lancaster and even Christina, I was like, this seems off brand for them. And it was basically confirmed during this scene that they stole that magic. And even with the language, it wasn't so much present in the previous episodes, but in this episode, I started to hear more of an African influence. African influence in the language. Did you hear that?
I did not. I didn't. I wasn't paying attention to the words that much, but it makes sense because if you go back to that episode where they were in the museum, Titus Braithwaite did travel around a lot and
Mm-hmm.
help other cultures. So it would make sense for him to, if he were to find out spells and magic of those other cultures, use them for himself.
Yeah, definitely. So somehow Titus is able to kind of break out of the bind, and he ends up appearing to Christina, making her and Ruby wreck. Christina flew through the windshield, and I was like, but then again, I was like, oh, she's invulnerable. It ain't gonna hurt her. But this motherfucker's gonna be like, the niggers have the book. And then just like that, they pulled his ass right back to the circle. And this time you've got Nanny Hattie, you got Hannah, you've got Dora, you've got Letty, you got Tick. And it's literally, I feel like you and I have been seeing this in every show we watch now, girls getting it done, because they are locking him in this circle, and Tick jumps on him. It starts like trying to stab him and stuff, and ends up gouging a huge piece of. At first, I thought it was organ, but it just looked like flesh. Did it not?
Flesh.
Like
Yeah,
flesh?
it was flesh.
Because apparently he has to ingest this meat along with a piece of Christina in order to create this bond so he can bind them. He ends up getting the flesh, and then the ancestors like banish Titus back to wherever the hell he came from. And this scene was sad to me because it was also them having to let go of their ancestors. This spell was so big that they needed their help, but they're not going to be able to use it again. So as they start saying the spells, you see Hannah and Hattie disappear, but they linger on Dora because it's like Tick's got that. He wants to hold on to her as long as he can. But again, unfortunately, she has to go back.
Right. And that was a kind of a hard scene I felt like for Tick, because just as soon as he found Dora and was able to talk to her and see her, he lost her again. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That on top of what he has to do in terms of this sacrifice, I think it was a tough scene. But we
Yeah.
go back again, back to the real world, and Hippolyta's checking in on Dee. Yo, Dee was pissed, and she had every right to be, in my opinion, because she was like, "You left me."
Hmm.
You freaking left me. And Hippolyta's trying to explain, where she was, what she did, but Dee, she's not in a space where she even wants to entertain that. But I felt like Hippolyta really handled it in a good way. What about you? How did you feel about that situation?
I mean, I think Hippolyta did as bestly as she could, but like you said, I still understand where Dee is coming from, because I don't think it's most likely that she left, that Dee is so angry at her. It's just that she's left, and all these bad things happen to her. So
Yeah.
basically, she's like, you weren't there to protect me when I needed you the most. But you know, Hippolyta in that scene, like you said, she does try to explain her that she was trying to become somebody that, you know, you would be proud of, Dee, that you would want me to be. But Dee, pretty much at this point, she's so frustrated with everything that's been going on, and the fact that she's unable to use her hand to draw at this point, that
Yeah.
she just is not having it.
Yeah. And you know what? I actually, so in the previous episodes, I was pissed at Hippolyta too. I was like, girl, how you just not going to come back? Like, you said you was coming back. Where was you at? But then I kind of put it into perspective. It was like, you know what? She was tracing through time on Earth 504 for 200 years. Time must work differently between these multiverses. So where she might have thought she was only gone for 2 days, that might have been a week, you know. We don't know that. So I kind of eased up on her a little bit. I was like, okay, I see what you was doing, but I also feel like this journey that you went on it's gonna play an important part of this story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um So they start talking about this binding spell that they need to put on Christina. And of course, they need a piece of Christina in order to be able to do that. And the logical choice to do it is to bring Ruby on board. And Tick is like, hell no. You know? Which in my head, I feel like I would have felt like he felt. But then again, I also would have put into perspective what needed to be done. And just would have been like, fine. What about you?
I think at this point, Ruby has proved that she can't be trusted. I mean, she's basically living with a person that they are trying to do this spell on. So,
Mm-hmm.
and no matter how much Letty has tried to talk to her, and this is half their fault too for keeping so
Yeah.
many secrets, but still, you know, no matter how much they've tried to be, you know, tell her like Christina is, you know, she's dangerous, yada yada
Mm-hmm.
yada, she still chose to leave and live with Christina. So
Yeah.
I felt Tick in that. I was like, yeah, to be honest, I don't know if I'd be able to trust her at this point either.
Yeah. But if you think about it also, this is like probably, well, maybe last episode. It shouldn't have taken the last two episodes for everybody to understand the full spectrum of what's going on here. And literally, we all just got here. So there's some healing that needs to happen with many of
Mm-hmm.
those relationships. But we jump back to George's garage, and they're in the Book of Spells, and Christina barges her happy ass in there. Now, she's like, give me the book. If I have the book, I can find another way to do my spell. And if there is a way, I won't have to kill you to do it. And basically, they looking at her like, nah, sis. You know? But again, she plays the family card. She's like, our families are not in war. And I'm like, girl, that just shows you y'all are the same family. And you still being stupid, like you still acting crazy. So she's like, give me the book. They're like, hell nah. And Christina's like, fine, has a little tantrum, goes out the door, not before lifting that invulnerability spell from Letty.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that
I,
scene?
I feel like that it like what are you talking about? We're not at war. You're trying to kill me, even though you're saying that it's nothing personal and that you want you're just trying to get immortality so you can experience the yada yada yada. You
Yeah,
still trying to end my life, and everybody in this room at this point is wants me to live. Like, so
yeah.
we are at war. You can't explain that away. You can't explain that away to just be like it's nothing, it's no big deal. It is a big deal, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt
Yeah.
that was really just like, really, Christina? Like, really?
But you know, the thing that I've come to understand about Christina as well, because we've seen flashes of it throughout this whole season, she's a freaking child. She is a child. She's been sheltered her whole time. And remember, she was talking about her father and the men of the lodge want to use this magic to bend the world to their will. She wants to use it to experience it. We've gotten a scene with her shifting into William, so she's experiencing what being a man must feel like. She's playing hide and seek with some little kids. She's like, oh, I've never played before. He, you know, even the experience of her kind of recreated Emmett Till's death um, was, in my opinion, a way for her to feel what she may not have been exposed to. So there's a level of naive naivete with Christina that I've noticed that came full circle in this episode, because she doesn't understand that you just can't go around killing people because you want a spell for immortality. I feel like she
Right.
truly doesn't understand that. So, oh well. But they end up heading to Letty's spot because it's protected. And of course, the music starts to play. We got Weary by Solange, which is one of my smoke songs, one of my drunk songs, whatever, whatever. But as they're going to Letty's house, they see a black family has moved in across the street, meaning that the pioneering that Letty did by getting that Winthrop house has opened the door for other black people to move into that neighborhood. So
Yep.
I don't know about you. I felt good about seeing that scene.
Yeah, to be honest with you, going back and looking at that scene again, when Letty saw the people moving in next door, I felt like her face was more like a shock, like a what the like,
Mm-hmm.
like how, people looked at her when she was moving in. But yeah, I'm pretty happy that that worked out for the best, that she gave that, pathway for other black families to move into that neighborhood.
Yeah, and again, it kind of goes back to the theme of sacrifice. She pioneered. She came in. She dealt with all the crap, which in turn opened the door for other African Americans to move into that neighborhood, possibly changing the course of their life as well. So I was
Yep.
glad to see that, and glad that they threw that in. But they get in the house. It's still got the voodoo X on it, so can't nobody who uses magic get in it. So they're still protected. Um, Tick ends up calling Gia. How did you feel about that?
I was like, why are you calling her for? You got lady, you got a baby on the way. What's going on? But it,
uh,
it turned out to be a better scene than I thought.
yeah, I think it was old because he was really mean to her
Yeah.
the last time he spoke to her, and I felt that conversation was warranted. So they end up meeting in the hotel, and of course, you see this white guy trying to hit on Gi, and she's like, "You exotic? Where are you from? Japan? What did he say? Japan or China or
Japan.
something?" Which is annoying in itself because there's other Asian countries out there, dude. But she ends up telling him like, "Yo, is fucking me worth you losing your life?" And dude's like, "Nope," and jumps off, like goes away. But they have that conversation. Like Gia and Tick have a conversation. He apologizes, which again is reinforcing for me, like, you finna die. It's solidified. You're gonna die. You need to make this right. And Gia's like, you know what? I'm somewhat selfish too, because since I've met you and young Ja, I see that I can feel things for other people. I'm not a monster, but when my Uma died, there's just this empty void that I feel like the emotions I was starting to feel has lost. And Tick kind of puts it into perspective like, that's an emotion. It's called grief. you know,
Hmm.
Many people go through it. We're all have the opportunity to be monsters or people or whatever. But at this point, what we had was real. You're a real person. And at this point, we're family, you know? Um, Gia says that her journey still hasn't done. According to the Mudang, she's going to see a lot more deaths, and eventually she's going to move into the darkness. Message. Okay. um, After this scene, we jump to Ruby and Letty. You want to take this one?
Yeah, we jump to Ruby and Letty, and they're in the graveyard. They're Letty's at her mother's grave, and Ruby comes up and replaces the flowers that are sitting on the mother's grave, which looks like she's been doing for a while. And we learn in this scene that the reasoning behind why Letty did not return for her mother's funeral was because she was in jail. So we finally get the answer to that in terms of what was up in terms of her not coming to her mother's funeral. But she admits too in the scene that she might not have came if she wasn't in jail. But they do have this conversation about um just being not really knowing what family was. Letty basically says, I really didn't know what family was until, just now. But at the same time, she she says, Ruby, this is our time to be a family. I need your help. I need you to get a piece of Christina so we can do this spell, yada yada yada. And Ruby is like, man, this the same old shit, man. Letty, this is like from the beginning of from episode 1. You're still doing the same things that you did before, and just because this is something new to you, it ain't nothing new to me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely. I was Team Ruby at that point because it did. If you think back to the first episode where she's like coming in with Ruby and Letty, and she's just kind of like, yeah, I need a place to stay. So it's like you're really, every time you come to her, you're asking her for something. So it wasn't any different than any time before. The one thing I wanted to point out that not very many people noticed, I don't think. So, of course, we know that Ruby's last name is Baptiste. And, of course, we see the head song of their mom, and the last name is Baptiste. And I was like, that's an Eve's Bayou. That's an Eve's Bayou reference. So go ahead with the little Easter eggs in there. But Ruby gets ready to walk off. Basically, so Letty's like, we need to learn magic. We should all have access to this magic. And Ruby's just like, I'm sticking with Christina. Bye. And she gets to walk off. And Letty's like, wait, I got to tell you a little bit more. That's not all there is to tell you. I know what I took that as. What did you take that as?
I don't know. This is one of the questions I still feel like I was going to get an answer to by the end of the episode. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I'm hoping that there's a season 2 where we can get, the answers to that. But I'm not really sure what was told in that, scene, basically.
Off first viewing, I didn't know. Well, I had an idea, but I didn't know fully what was said. And then as the episode progressed, I kind of came to my idea, my thought of what was being said. But I'll hold on that till we get a little bit further into the episode.
So in this next scene, we get Dee, and she's got, she's still in the bed moping around. She's got a newspaper in her hand, which basically says, Emmett Till's murderers has been acquitted of all charges by an all-white jury, pretty much. And she's, upset, understandably. She basically is like drawing on the newspaper, drawing out their faces. And, Hippolyta slips this comic book up under her door. And when Dee goes to pick it up, it's this, Orinthia blue comic book drawn perfectly. And when Hippolyta comes in, Dee's like, where did you learn how to draw like this? I thought this scene was so great because not only did Hippolyta mention the actual artist that has been drawing all of Dee's creations throughout this whole season, like the stuff in the comic books, the stuff on the travel, the maps and everything like that. Her name is Afua Richardson. She's an African-American, Native American artist. And like I said, she's done wonderful work throughout of Lovecraft Country and in this episode. So I really loved how they shouted her out in this.
Definitely. Like when she said it, I was like, it's got to be a real artist. And I went on Instagram to look at it, and I'm like, oh, hey, girl. So of course I followed because I want to stay like up to date. Because I mean, the artwork has been wonderful, but you see that Dee, she's pissed because she can't draw. She's left-handed, and her left-handed is gone. So she's trying to maneuver with the right hand. It's not working. And Hippolyta is just basically like, girl, I got you, daughter. I got you. Follow me. And they go to the room, and you just hear like all these like machines and mechanics going on. What do you think was in that room?
I don't know, because initially I was like, well, she showed her what we get at the end. Basically, I'm not going to spoil that, but I don't know. I felt like there was something else in that room because she looked around like this. So I felt like maybe Hippolyta built that, multiverse machine in their own apartment, so she wouldn't have to go back to Kentucky to travel if she wanted to. And I was like, girl, like you got all this futuristic stuff in your apartment. You go ahead. She done the dang thing.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like that was her, like, how we have our office spaces or whatever. We try to make it cute. I felt like that was her little cute office space with the multiverse machine. I feel like she might have had a couple of aliens in there working on that arm for her because she had other stuff she needed to do, but again, she mentions, because Dee, she's still upset, but she's like, people think of time like it's a physical manifestation. In our mind, we get stuck in time, but in reality, time never stops. Basically saying the way you feel right now, it won't last forever, you know. And I think her showing whatever was in that room gave her kind of like a semblance of comfort. But again, it's just one of those things that with this episode that we haven't really seen a lot of until we got towards the end of the season, a strong family connection. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like this is a family now, which is further expanded upon in a couple of scenes later on. But we get back to Ruby and Christina. They're in the basement, and Christina starts to explain like the ins and outs of magic to Ruby. Um, how did you feel about this scene?
Um, I wasn't quite sure what Ruby was up to in this scene because she had just met with Letty in the graveyard and told Letty she wasn't going to help her. But she goes down to Christina. Christina's showing her all these spells and telling her about incantations and what they need, and she lets it spill that the potion that she uses to turn into William contains her blood hair nails. And you get this moment with Ruby where she's like, huh, okay. Christina kind of catches it, but she kind of lets it roll off her back. But it was really kind of confusing because I was like, you just told Letty that you weren't going to help her, but like you seemed like you were trying to help her. So like, what's going on? What's going on?
Yeah. For me, that scene was, I saw a switch flip in that scene. At first, I was just kind of like, she kind of resolved that she was going to help Letty, because sometimes when you have like friends or family or whatever and they constantly asking you stuff and you like, nah, I ain't going to help you, but if you see that it's kind of like a dire situation, you kind of say you're not going to help, but you're going to help them in real life. So
Mm-hmm.
at first I thought
Mm-hmm.
it was that, but then when Ruby says, she kind of stops, she goes, oh, I was just trying to figure out when you had the time or when you got that from me. Oh, now I remember. And that flipped the switch for me. I was like, she's going to help Letty. But they end up kissing in their original forms. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you kind of see with Christina, kind of like, have you ever done this before? And Ruby's like, no. And eventually, they go off to, have some sex or whatever.
Yeah.
Which again, I'll get back to it later in the episode, but again, it's that naivete that Christina has that is starting to become more and more present throughout this episode in particular. Um, in the name of tying up loose ends, Tick gets baptized at Letty's request.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very beautiful scene. Because Letty has this conversation with Tick, basically saying that, at the very beginning of this, episode one, basically, I was not a faith type of person, but everything that we've been through, everything that I have been through, I know he is there and he is in all of us. So she's
Mm-hmm.
basically trying to, tell him that, I know you're doing this sacrifice and you're doing it so our family can live and everybody else can live, but just know that there is something else once you move on. And she's trying to giving him that encouragement to say, I know this is something that's got to happen, but just know that this isn't it.
Yeah. And I also felt like this was kind of like the final goodbye before the goodbye, because once the shit goes down, they might not have the opportunity to really like reconcile with each other, that Tick may not be around,
Mm-hmm.
after this. The other thing that I thought very interesting about Letty's conversation about magic and religion, at the end of the day, in my opinion, religion like is magic. Magic is just another word for a miracle. We see it happen all the time. So there's always been like this discussion that magic is satanic and Christianity is where it's at, but thinking in terms of religions, it all comes from somewhere. They're all intertwined. That's why in some of these religions you see the same figures pop up in their Bibles or their beliefs. They just have different names.
Mm-hmm.
But we get to this next scene. Everybody's getting ready to hit the road, and I mean everybody. Woody about to be full. And shout out to Woody. Woody is the only one to seem to make it through these episodes unscathed.
George did say Woody is going to outlast, or was it Hippolyta? I think it might be Hippolyta. George, but they said, Woody's going to outlast us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they're piling in the car, getting ready to head to Artem, and Ruby shows up, and they have like a little sister moment. She's like, here, girl, I got it for you. Got the potion. And they hug it out or whatever. Now, at this time, I'm side-eyeing the screen because there's a couple of things happening here. Throughout this episode, they keep flashing to the Safe Negro Travel Guide sign, and it's always crooked. So, of course, you know me, I'm a big believer in omens. I was like, that ain't good. But then also, I thought in terms of what the Safe Negro Travel Guide is and what it did for Black people at that time. One person or two people, George Hippolyta, drove up and down the United States figuring out these routes that are safe for Black people to travel, often putting their lives in danger. George died, so again, it comes back to sacrifice to make sure other people are safe. But they get in the car and they start singing. Go for it.
Yeah. I think this was all like how these two scenes meshed together, because right before they get in the car, the song Nina Simone's "I Am Blessed" is playing, and Tick takes that look around to realize that he's surrounded by family. So again, he's enjoying his moments right then and there, and then they all get in the car, and everybody basically starts singing along to what I thought and what the closed captioning on the show said, the coasters.
Yeah, hold on to that. Hold on to that part. We'll save that for the end.
Okay. So, well, it's the coasters. Basically, the song is Shaboom. Yeah, Shaboom. But basically, I thought this was another wonderful moment, like two great moments together that they had, because they're all pretty much singing and having a good time. Even Montrose reluctantly is just like, shaboom, shaboom, I thought this was just like a great scene to show like family and how much everybody loved each other and they were there for each other.
Yeah, like when it first started, and I was happy because Dee initiated it, and she's the one that's kind of like in this space right now, like, fuck all y'all left me, blah, 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 my arm all janky and shit. But she starts singing, it gets contagious, everyone in the backseat starts singing. Then you see Montrose, Tick, and Leti in the front just kind of like, and I'm like, come on, guys, come on. And eventually Atticus jumps in and he does his little deep voice, then it's Leti, and then Montrose is all like, all right, fine, or whatever. I'm like, oh, bah humbug, dude. Like, come on. Like, but again, it's also one of those moments where I'm looking like, when you have a moment of happy, especially in this show, shit's about to hit the fan. So
definitely was the calm before the storm.
Yeah. They arrive at Artem. They lay an assault down in the forest, whatever and whatnot, preparing for this binding spell that they need to do. And it's time for Tick to consume the flesh and drink the potion. And that shit was so funny because he ain't want to do it. And he looked at Montrose. Montrose was like, pinch and swallow, dude. So pulls out this flesh that looks like a pork chop to me. But I was still grossed out. And then, of course, he downs the potion, which apparently is supposed to contain Christina's toenails and blood and stuff like that. And then Montrose gives him a swig out of his flask. You happy your daddy was a drunk at that point, weren't you? Watch the taste at your mouth. But it goes into kind of like an aerial shot of Artem, and you see that the whole town is surrounded by kind of like a salt road. So basically that was part of the protection that was keeping Artem safe from trespassers, I guess.
And well as Ghost, remember, because I think this is the reason why Hattie, Dora, and Hannah were not able to help them in this final spell, because that salt was keeping them out of Artem.
Good point. Good point. The lodge is all lit up, so it's like it's no secret. Everybody knew they was coming at this point, and I'm like, Tick, it's a trap. It's a trap. you know. But the townspeople show up and just take them. It's like a mob, and they just take them. We flash to Ruby and Leti. They're in the tower drawing symbols on the wall and everything, and just making sure that everything is protected. How did you feel about this scene and how it played out?
Um, it was a good scene, man. I mean, because I felt like they played a good trick on me anyways. I know some
Mm,
people felt like they already knew what was going on, but for me, I was like, yes, they're about to do this. They're about to take Christina way down, and everything's perfect. Everybody's happy. And then we find out in the scene, because Ruby's acting a little bit funny. Letty
yeah.
can tell, like, she's saying things like stuff like, I finally think I understand what family is about, after having that conversation with Ruby in the graveyard. And as well, Letty's like, well, I'm glad you decided to help us. And she's like, of course, you're my sister. And that's when we learn that Ruby is not Ruby. Ruby is Christina. And, all
Yeah.
of a sudden, my worry went straight to Ruby, like, oh my God, where the heck is Ruby right now? And we learned that Ruby's in a coma, hooked up to one of those IVs, so Christina can use her for the potion. And I'm like, oh hell no.
This was one of those moments I immediately flashed back to Terminator 2, where he's like, "What's your dog's name?" It's Max. Janelle, what's wrong with Wolfie? Wolfie's fine, honey. Your step parents are dead.
Your foster parents are dead. Yeah.
But I figured it out. So I'm gonna tell y'all how I figured out what was happening. I figured it out when Ruby showed up with that potion. All right, so she shows up with the potion, and I'm looking at her, not fully like, well, maybe it's not Ruby, but I'm like very suspicious of it.
Mm-hmm.
They get in the car and they start singing Shaboom, Life Could Be a Dream. And I immediately flip back to my music nerd days because I like the coasters, but I also know the controversy with that song. It was originally recorded by a group called the Chords. And during the period, the course of like a year, this song was recorded 2 more times by 2 additional groups. So the Chords originated it. The Coasters did a revamp, and then another group called the Crew Cuts did a version of it. They put out a pop black sanitized version of the song. And this is a thing with people who know this type of music. Same thing we saw in the scene with Ruby being Hillary with the 2 versions of Tutti Frutti. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's Christina. I was like, that's Christina, especially in the car. From that little piece of information, plus after the I forgot the Black Fans of the Lovecraft Country group on Facebook, shout out to y'all, somebody else pointed out that's the song in the first season that Ruby said she didn't want to sing when Leti was up on stage because the song was stupid. So I was like, I seen you. So when that part happened, I was like, I knew it. But then I was like, you damn Ruby dead. Or Ruby in a coma. Like Ruby fell victim to the game here. But they fight, and simultaneously there's a fight brewing down on the bridge in Arnhem between the townspeople, Hippolyta, G.I., Montrose. I was so happy because I was waiting for Hippolyta to pull out that Dahomey Amazon fight, and she was knocking tails, man. When you flash back to Ruby and Christina, they brawling. Not Ruby and Christina, Leti and Christina, they're brawling in there. And eventually, Leti gets pushed out the window and slams to the ground. And immediately I'm like, shit, the baby. Shit, she's dead.
Yeah.
What did you think there?
I mean, I thought the same thing. And in terms of them fighting on that bridge too, I was just waiting for Hippolyta to just be like, I thought she was going to like knock them all out based off the training that she received. I was like, y'all don't know Hippolyta is a Dora Milaje now. She gonna knock all y'all out and save the day. But unfortunately, she does get hit on the head. But yeah, when Leti gets thrown out of the tower, I definitely thought, I was like, well, there she go,
Yeah.
because that's it.
Yeah. But again, this is Lovecraft Country, so you don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, Christina makes her way back to the lodge. But in the meantime, Dee is kind of left in the car. And I know that you felt a way about this when this was happening.
Yeah, when they show Dee in the car all alone, and she's actually reading the Lovecraft Country book with a little flashlight in the back, I was like, "What in the hell? How y'all gonna leave this baby alone again? Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is the how many of time you done left this baby alone in the woods? Like, I'm not. I'm so upset. Like, I was really upset."
Oh my gosh. So yeah, she's in the car reading George Freeman's Lovecraft Country. And she hears some some rustling outside. And she looks at it's a Shoggoth trying to get in the car. Well, at that point I'm like, she's not really as scared as I think she should be. And sure enough, Tick's Shoggoth comes out and is like, rawr, and they're fighting or whatever. And it's a black Shoggoth, so I'm like, right on, right on. So, I like that scene, but I thought that scene was also very important the closer we get to the end of the episode. So I'm going to hold on to it from there. Christina starts to spell. She shows up at the lodge and she starts to spell. How did you feel about what was happening at that point?
I feel like I saw Tick's soul crush at this point. When he saw Christina walk up with the book of names, he knew Leti had the book of names, so he knew there was something that had to have happened to Leti for Christina to get that book. And I felt like as soon as he realized that Leti didn't have it anymore, his soul was pretty much crushed at this point, because that's his Leti, that's his baby, and he's like, at this point, we did all of this for nothing because it's not going to work.
Yeah. Was it just me? But I was like, how did Christina get cleaned up so quickly? That spell left blood and stringy guts
Right.
everywhere.
Well,
Coming through.
they have those special cleaning powers that that Gia's mama had, and
that was crazy. But we see Montrose, Hippolyta, and Gia. They've been brought to the site, put on their knees so they can witness all of this. And man, Christina just slices Tick's arms, and this like fountain of blood comes out of him. And I'm like, how is he gonna live through? He's not gonna live
right.
through this because it's pouring out at this point.
Yeah, at some point I thought he was gonna just faint and he just wanted to be conscious for any of this, because yeah, that was pretty on both arms. Woo!
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we actually do see in this scene Christina actually, walks up under that pool of blood that's coming out of his arms, and it's just basically like she's bathing. Like, I looked at the screen and I was like, she's literally bathing herself in his blood. And I was like, I get the reference. I get the reference in terms of our blood having to be spilt in order for anyways, I'm not going to but that scene shocked me a little bit, because I was like, they literally did that. But anyways.
So she starts chanting, Tick's soul's basically coming out of him at this point. And in the back, you see Leti. She's okay. And she starts running up, and you see this moment in between them where they're like, I love you too, But
yeah.
Christine.
Tick and Leti.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah. And to get names switched up. There's so much going on in this scene. But yeah, they have that moment. And then you look over at Leti. She stabs Christina. But by this time, it's kind of too late because the invulnerability, the immortality spell is working. But that's not stopping Leti. She's chanting. She's like heavy chanting. Like, really going in, and Christina's like, ha 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 ha, it's not gonna work, you're too late. And then you look over at Gia and Hippolyta, and Gia's looking like, I need to get on those stairs, because there's like this big funnel of like black smoke. And of course I flash back to what she said, she's has yet to enter the darkness. So I'm glad that they brought back Gia into the fold, because I felt like that would be a shame if they just had that one episode focused on her and we never see her again.
Hmm.
So I'm glad she kind of folded in, because at this point she's part of the family.
Yeah,
But
like oh, sorry. I was gonna say, yeah, like Tick told her back at wherever they met at earlier in the episode, like it's their destined. They were destined to be intertwined some way, somehow, and to become family. So he feels like Gia coming into his life was, his destiny. Like you were here to help us. You were placed into my life to help us with this.
yeah, she makes it to the stairs, and two tails come out of her eyes. One impales Christina, and the other wraps around Tick, because they needed to get them bonded in order for this spell to work. And as this happens, you start to see little flashes from both Christina and Tick. So
Hmm.
from Christina, we know that Ruby stole the potion after they had sex or whatever, and that's where Christina decided, okay, give me your blood, you in a coma. So you see
Hmm.
that part. You see Tick introducing Dee to the Shoggoth and kind of giving
Hmm.
her control over him. You see kind of Tick going through the baptism and everything. You see Tick give Hippolyta a letter from Montrose. And then you see something I wasn't expecting. Christina, as Ruby, gave Leti back her invulnerability.
Yep. Yep. During this scene, we do have that flashback where right before Letty hits the ground, after Ruby Christina throws her out the tower, she does say a little bit of a spell, which puts the mark of Cain back on Letty. So even still, even with everything that Ruby, tried to do, double cross Christina, she felt like she still needed to keep her promise to Ruby, just to say, I promised you. Basically, she said, I promised Ruby that, you wouldn't get hurt. So she still felt
Yeah,
the need to keep that promise.
yeah. And again, it goes back to Christina, that naivete I feel she has. She's a child, so this is ultimately what got her fucked up by giving her back the mark of Cain. But they continue to. Letty continues to read the spell or whatever, and Christina gets crushed under some rocks, and she's like, ah! Ah! At this point, what are you feeling?
I was like, yo, you brought this on yourself. Like, because she's sitting up under these big old, large stones, and she's yelling for somebody to help her. Girl, who gonna help you? You just tried to kill all these people.
Yeah,
Like, we not letting you out of where you are. And she actually is trying to do a little bit of a magic to try to help herself out of the situation. And Letty just walks up real gangsta like and is like, it ain't gonna work. And she's like, and Christina's like, oh, you've bound me from doing magic. And Letty's like, not just you, every white person in the world is bound from magic. And she's basically like, magic is ours now. So basically, we finally understand, what the Hannah spell, what she was trying to do, because we didn't get that earlier in the episode. We just knew that Hannah had this big spell that was going to change everything. Finally, we learned that, hey, Hannah was trying to make it so that, this magic can no longer be used against African American people.
yeah. And remember when you were talking about where Letty told Ruby before she left the graveyard, there's more I need to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I felt she told her. This is what I think pushed Ruby over the edge to go and get that, or try to get the potion from
Mm-hmm.
Christina. Because at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, Ruby and Christina, yeah, they liked each other, but they were using each other. It was a two-way usury happening. Once Ruby heard, oh well, all black people gonna have magic, then I don't necessarily need her. Like you, my sister, like your baby's father. We trying to keep him alive. She not gonna have magic once all of this is said and done. Let me roll with family. That's what I felt like changed her mind to make her go get, or attempt to get, the potion.
Gotcha.
Um, they all rush over to Tick. Man, this was a sad scene that I knew was coming. How did you feel?
Oh man, just like you said, very sad, very emotional scene, because again, at this point, Montrose still believes that Tick has, he could survive this spell, not knowing that Tick and Letty lied to him before. So he actually goes and tries to pick up Tick, and it's like, come on, boy, let's go. Let's get up. Tick, Atticus, get up. And man,
Yeah.
my heart literally broke. Because you could see just like the hurt when he realized, I think in the same scene, Hippolyta hands him that letter that we saw in the flashbacks, and you can see him just like realize that, Atticus is not, he's not getting up. He's gone.
Yeah. What also sucked about it as well, because I feel like I kind of saw it on his face. Everybody else who was there knew Tick wasn't going to make it out of this alive. So he was
Yeah.
the only one who didn't know. So while he's like, boy, get up, everybody's like,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is not funny. But I cried a little bit. I didn't cry a lot because I had already reconciled with the fact he wasn't going to make it out. But it was still sad. And again, with these actors and actresses, they better have all of the awards next season because these performances was off the chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hear Christina hollering again. I'm sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, because you touched on, how everybody knew except for Montrose that Tick was going to die. So basically, again, the whole theme of these episodes have been secrets. And, within the letter that Tick gives Montrose, he actually says, hey, I know I kept this one last secret from you, but, basically, please forgive me. And I had to do this in order to protect my family. But he also tells Montrose in this letter, to say, you're going to be a grandfather. Use young George to become the father that you weren't to me. You have a second chance of fatherhood, so use it wisely, which again just added to the scene and made it even more emotional than it was.
Yeah, great call out because again, up to the last episode, Tick didn't fully understand the dynamic of the relationship between George, Dora, Montrose, why he was raised the way he was. And I think now that he got a picture of it, he understood the circumstances and it's like, the thing that you wanted, you've got an opportunity to do it, but do it better now that you know better,
Yeah.
So that was a really good call out there. But you hear Christina hollering in the background, help me, help me, help me. And you see Dee roll up and Dee you see it in her face. Like she's changed. She has changed. Like she's not the lost little girl victim anymore. She's like coming into her own, which I don't feel like she would have got there if she hadn't gone through what she had gone through, and if Hippolyta didn't come back being like the Uber woman, But Christina's like, Dee, help me, and Dee's like, still haven't learned.
Right.
She pulls that what you call it, the sling off her arm, and she's like, choo, choo, choo. She even torques it up a little bit before she puts it on Christina's neck. You just see it going tighter, tighter, tighter. Gush of blood pop out. And that scene, I was like, okay. Now, when she said that, who did you think she was talking about?
We're in terms of you still haven't learned.
Yeah.
I thought she was basically telling Christina that she hadn't learned from trying to. I mean, you've used us this whole time to try to get what you want, and now you're still here asking for my help. Like, we're not here to serve you. We're here to live our own lives. We ain't here to help you, especially when in this circumstance where you've tried to destroy my family. So go ahead, lie there and, be dead, because this is it.
Yeah. So I took that. I thought she was talking about Tick Letty, like the rest of the family. Because while she was in the car, she was reading Lovecraft Country by George Freeman. And remember, Tick, when he said he got that book, a woman with a robotic arm gave it to him and shoved him back through the portal. But he said there was rioting happening. White people were rioting and everything. And the whole thing about this spell being done to keep magic within Black people was to keep all of them protected. And when she was in the car, she was reading that book. She said he knew telling the story was a kind of power, but he also knew that it wasn't enough. If they were ever going to disrupt a hierarchy of warlocks, they would have to spill blood other than their own. And I took that to mean as we just did all of this and you're going to leave this bitch alive. I'm going to fix this for you right now. There's no possibility that she comes back to life or gains any type of magic or control over us. And I felt like that's why she killed her. And a couple of episodes ago, I had made the statement of, we are not our ancestors. We are a product of them. And while they've laid the foundation, which each generation that goes by, we're able to push and do just a little bit more. I felt like that was Dee knowing everything she knows from being raised by George, Hippolyta, Tick, Leti, all of those people, and then taking it a step forward, understanding that you cannot leave this loose end. If we've done this and this sacrifice has been made for this purpose, this is a loose end where we don't get to keep. The Braithwaite family bloodline ends here. You know?
Gotcha.
So, and then of course we see the awesome finishing shot of the Shoggoth coming up and rowling at the moon. Basically, that's Dee's buddy now. She got her a uber monster pit bull that she could sick on anyone whenever she feels like it. Oh gosh, and that's the end of the episode. What do you think? Any party shots?
Yeah, man, I just love this show so much. I love most of all seeing Tick's journey from the beginning of episode 1, where we actually see him, you know, reading about, you know, I think it was like a Confederate. I keep forgetting the name of the book. It's anyways, it was a Disney movie that flopped really hard. But anyways, they made it into a Disney movie that flopped really hard. But I keep forgetting the name of it. But I loved seeing his journey from, you know, just reading about, you know, heroes in books to actually becoming a hero towards the end. Because at the beginning, he's sitting here, he's, you know, walking with the lady on the bus saying like, you know, I love to read about, you know, sci-fi, you know, heroes, but I could never really be, you know, a hero, yada, 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 especially coming from what he's done back in the war. You know, he's really at the belief of he's this, you know, type of monster. But at the very end of this, you know, season, we get him becoming that hero and making that sacrifice so that, you know, not only his family, but people who look like him will have a better life.
Yeah. Amazing show. If we're rating it on a scale of 1 to 10 on a Blerdometer, for me, it's a solid 10.
Yeah.
Solid 10. I don't think there's only been a few shows to take me through a round of emotions. I think the only other show to make me cry like I cried on this show was Pose. You know, when Candy died. Spoiler. But even when this was over, like the night was still young. I'm like, I need to watch something else. Like I want to watch something, and nothing I could find would like give me what I wanted. I like tried to watch The Craft, and yeah, it was okay and all that, but it wasn't Lovecraft Country. So jumping into some news and gossip, you know, Friday they held a finale viewing. In the form of like an event. Basically, it was a 1950s drive-in called Lovecraft Drive-In, where people could go watch the final episode socially distanced, but like in this cool little world that they've created specifically for Lovecraft Country. And even with the marketing before this show came out, I think HBO or whatever marketing company they hired did a really great job of engaging the Blerd community, the Black creatives, to really get us involved in this show and be able to have like a YouTube channel or segment where we break it down one for one. The show has not been renewed or canceled for season 2. I have a feeling it's going to be a one and done like Watchmen, but I really hope not. Misha Green herself said she's already got ideas for where she can go with season 2. Because again, with season 1, everything past episode 5 was really built up off what was in the novel, but were completely different directions. Even down to the ending of this one. You know, it's not how it ended in the book. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I would most definitely love to see a season 2, and I believe all the actors are on board as well, but
mhm.
I would definitely love to see a season 2. Maybe we get, something in the future and we're following, George,
Yeah.
Tick's son. I don't know, but I'm just hoping that we do get that second season. Um, and to be honest with you, if we don't, I'll be okay. There's still some
Yeah.
questions I have, I need answers to, that I felt like there was a couple of things that I didn't get answers to in this first season. But even if they don't decide to do a season 2, I'm fine with that. But I would really love for everybody to come back and give us a season 2, because this shows so much love, so much emotions. Just one of the best things I've seen on TV in a really, really,
Yeah.
really, really, really long time. And that could be because we're, in a situation right now where we have to be in isolation because of COVID. But just this show has been everything for the past 10 weeks, has been everything to me, and it's
Yeah.
been the high point of this whole isolation that we've been forced to be in. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And also, people, if you are craving more like I am, again, there's, again, the Lovecraft Country book. It's almost a different story from the season. Again, there's similarities, but there's so much in this book that you can get into. So if you need something to pass the time in between now and finding out if we are going to get a season 2, definitely read the book. It's a good read. There's also other books out there that are based on Lovecraftian lore, but told through an African American perspective. Victor Laval's The Ballad of Black Tom. I say it a few times. I've just started that one, and it's amazing as well. Um,
And the name of that book that I keep on forgetting is The Princess of Mars, and the movie is called John Carter. Sorry, but I just thought of that, and I was like, I keep forgetting the name of it, but I know this. I know this.
Yeah, John
But I'm
Carter
sorry.
sucked.
Read the book. Read
But
the
yeah, I think what this show has really solidified, Watchmen did a really great job with Regina King heading that up. And now this show being almost, not almost, like 100% driven by Black characters, these stories, people want to see them. The finale, if I'm not mistaken, was the highest rated of the season. You know, these actors and actresses, they need all the awards come Emmy time. But I hope what it does is it shows other broadcasting companies or other production companies that you can make outstanding stories with African American leads, and people will watch them and be able to relate to them.
Not only that, Black people like sci-fi. We like
Yes.
horror. Give us more of that, please. It doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be a romantic comedy, yada yada yada. We are fans of horror and sci-fi and thrillers as well. So please give us those shows where we can, in those movies where we can get that and we can relate to them as, being African Americans. It's cool. We love that kind of stuff. Bring it on. We're ready, man.
Most definitely. And I think that's the allure of this show. They've had so many genres in one season. Like, again, with Black people heading them up, the Indiana Jones adventure, you got Hippolyta doing Quantum Leap. I mean, like, come on. Like, we love
Yep.
this. We love this shit.
Yep.
Um, Man, this sucks because I'm like, we're wrapping up, we're closing out Lovecraft Country, but again, we're also closing out to a lot of the people we've been interacting with on the comments board. So again, you all, thank you for supporting Blerd Up as we pump these out with this series as well as new content. We are definitely looking for additional shows, hopefully something similar to Lovecraft Country that we can then dig into. So again, if you notice anything about this episode, or if you have any recommendations for the next series we should pick up, make sure you drop down in those comments and let us know. We do read them and we do respond to them. We're a little behind these days. You see, we're doing this virtual. I'm pretty sure you can guess. My dumbass has COVID, so there's a delay. That's why. Doesn't mean we love you any less. But again, from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for joining us every week, spending an hour of your day with us. We truly appreciate it. Until the next time, until the next most fantastical African American show pops up, again, we're your host, I'm Killer Cam.
And I am Monique.
We'll see you on the next episode of Blerd Up Reviews.